This program is brought to you by Pussy Magnets.
Put a midge on your friends with a pussy magnet.
Welcome, welcome, my lovely lumps. Or maybe let's go with lovely labs. That's pretty on brand. Anyway, I'm so thrilled to have you here in the Labia Lounge. We're going to be yarning about all things sexuality, intimacy, womanhood, relating, holistic health, and everything in between. We're going to have vag loads of real chats with real people about real shit. So buckle up because you're about to receive the sex ed that you never had and hopefully have a bit of a chuckle while you're at it. Before we get stuck in, I'd like to respectfully acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land on which I'm recording this, the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation. It's a massive privilege to be living and creating dope podcast content in Naarm, and I just want to pay my respects to their elders past, present, and emerging. Now, if you're ready, let's flap and do this.
Don't panic, you're not broken. Your sex education was a piece of shit. Get your flaps out and pull up the couch. It's the Labia Lounge.
Hey gang, just before we jump into this episode, I wanted to offer you an opportunity to access my new mini course for free before I start charging for it in future. It's for people with vulvas and it's quick to complete. It's all about demystifying the female body and pleasure anatomy and getting some basic fundamentals to understand your body better. It's called Pussy Pleasure Secrets, Your Roadmap to Bedroom Bliss. You can grab it on the freebies page of my website or in the show notes. It's a great little free resource to kind of dip your toe in or act as a bit of a taster for my work. So if you've ever been curious about this sort of thing and you just don't know where to start, or you want a really quick, easy, accessible, non-threatening way to get the ball rolling and start working on this stuff, this is a great place to start. Hello, my labial lovers. Welcome back to the lounge. Grab yourself a click cushion, get cozy, pop your feet up. Today we're talking about different styles of relating that don't follow the usual scripts about love, intimacy, and relationships. We'll talk about decentering romance and different approaches such as relationship anarchy, polyamory, solo poly, platonic partnerships, and different configurations that we can explore when relating. I feel like there's something really fascinating and also subversive about, not following the sort of norm core relational scripts that we've just been, especially the very heteronormative kind of cisgendered ones that we've been passed down. So today I've got the perfect person to be chatting to about all of this. I've got Cyndi Darnell, originally from Australia, which is where I am coming to you from. She's now one of New York City's most renowned sex therapists, sexologists, and relationship counselors with a unique holistic approach that bridges science, psychology, and compassionate erotic inquiry. Darnell has become a pivotal figure for those seeking to transform their intimate lives. With over 2 decades of global consulting practice, she's the author of Sex When You Don't Feel Like It, The Truth About Mismatched Libido and Rediscovering Desire. Bloody banger title for a book, by the way. Everyone run out and get that immediately. And Cyndi combines her expertise in sexology, psychotherapy, and relationship counseling to address the complex challenges of maturing populations, people over 30, in modern relationships. As a pioneer in somatic sexology, Darnell, well, I'm going to call you Cyndi. Sorry, I'm just reading out the bio, but it feels very formal to call you by your last name. Cyndi employs an innovative approach that harmonizes the mind, body, and emotions, distinguishing her from traditional sex therapy practices. This work moves beyond the scope of medicalized sex therapy to include things like navigating desire and mismatched libido, harnessing the role of emotion in boosting sex drive, navigating eroticism beyond menopause, changing relationship structures in mid to late life, navigating sex as a content single woman, including exploring concepts of chosen family, solo polyamory, and platonic partnerships. She's known for her compassionate and evidence-based approach while supporting individuals, couples, and multi-partner configurations to create fulfilling, authentic relationships and invigorating sex lives. Hey, Cyndi.
Hello there. It's nice to be here.
What a bio.
It's been decades in the making, so it's very meaty these days.
Yeah. All right, amazing. Well, I was just saying to you off air that it was so tempting to do another episode about, desire discrepancy, mismatched libidos, because I know you have a whole book on it, and I'm like,
Mhm.
but I just thought, oh, well, I have already done two pretty whopping episodes about that specific topic over the last 12
Mm.
months. So, I didn't want to go over old territory too much, even though I know you'd have a fresh take and it would be such a great resource. But I think I'd prefer people to just grab your book and listen to my
Mhm.
other episodes on that. And I wanted to focus today on something a bit different that I haven't done much on.
Mhm.
Yeah, so I'm excited to dive into it because, I use the word subversive, and I just think people can have so much resistance, fear,
Mm.
shame. There's a lot of
Mhm. Mhm.
big feelings
Mhm.
surrounding different or alternative styles of relationship. Um,
Yeah.
and I just want to talk about your experience with that professionally and personally, and unpack what that can look like and why that might appeal or work for certain
Yeah.
people. So my first question, where do I want to start with this? Why do you think so many people, and I don't know if this is actually true, but it feels like, to me, at least in my realm, it's in an
Mm.
increasing amount of people feel something just isn't working in monogamy,
Mhm.
um, and are kind of looking for alternative language or approaches, and
Mm.
sort of stepping outside of the script.
Mm. I mean, I think the part of the reason why it's become a bigger conversation, and I don't know how big the conversation is in Australia. In New York City, it's very mainstream. I will say that. I don't know if it's like that in Australia. So, a lot of the big publications, the New York Magazine and even the New York Times, these kinds of massive publications, every now and again they'll have stories about non-monogamy and polyamory. And when it used to be in the media 10 years ago, or even like when I was still living in Australia, if it was spoken about in the media, then it was usually with some kind of um, implication that people would only do that because they were defective, or they were perverts, or there would be some terrible reason why you would do that. That you would come to it under duress. That one wouldn't
Mm,
organically find oneself going, what is this polyamory thing? I think that narrative has changed now with lots of younger people, the Gen Zs, Gen Zs, and certainly younger millennials, all identifying as some variation on queer, non-binary, and some kind of non-monogamous. The younger folks have really picked up the slack on this in the last 10 or 15 years. And while young people may be the ones embracing these practices and titles, it does tend to be, and this is also possibly my um, work situation, because I tend to work with clients who are not exclusively, but generally the clients I work with are over 30, over 35, who maybe have been in relationships of whatever description in their 20s, um, and are starting to think about some version of, in their real kind of embodied adulthood, what does relationship mean to me? So in their 20s, they've experimented with whatever things. And then by the time they hit their 30s, they're like, if I'm going to have a kid, I'm going to have to do it now. If I'm going to, get married or settle down, I'm going to have to do it now. Maybe I'm queer. Maybe my gender is not what I thought it was. These types of things tend to get very, very strong in our 30s and 40s if we haven't addressed them earlier. So that's kind of a lot of the client base that I tend to work with, is these folks kind of having these, maybe not epiphany sounds too strong, but these real kind of lingering questions about what's going to work for me? Who am I in the context of sex and relationships? And then what does that mean about the choices I'm going to make? Now, whether you are in a relationship or not, you can still have these kind of internal existential questions about how did I end up here? And, for some people, even asking themselves that question can feel terrifying, especially if they have made a bunch of decisions in other parts of their life where to change course might require a big upheaval. If they are financially betrothed to somebody or hooked in with, they've got a child or a mortgage or something, there's something going on that they don't have a lot of flexibility and freedom. These kinds of questions can start to feel scary. And so I think a lot of people fall into monogamy, not because they necessarily are choosing it, but because it feels like the only option they have, or they didn't even realize they had a choice at a deeper level. Like, maybe conceptually they've seen it on Instagram or TikTok or whatever, but it's sort of always felt like that's something other people do. I wouldn't do that until they have this sense that, oh, hold on, something in me is stirring, something in me is calling my attention. And it's something in that realm, but I don't know what. Or they find themselves, drawn to somebody that they work with or somebody that they see on the tram every morning, or they're kind of like, God, why can't I stop thinking about this person, even though they're perfectly content with their main partner? All of a sudden, they're attracted to somebody else, and that they start to wonder, in the old days, people would say, well, that would be cheating. And maybe some people still call that cheating. But this is a very normal thing. It's a very common thing. And in the old days, you were rewarded for, keeping it to yourself, keeping your pants on. And if people choose to do that, that's fine. I'm not saying you shouldn't. But more and more people are waking up to the ideas. And this is not just about sex, too. I'm using this as an example, but obviously there's a lot more going on here about power dynamics and social structures and who has access to, money. And there's a lot of stuff that goes on here. This is not just about getting laid by lots of people. But at a superficial level, that's sometimes how people come to the awareness of it. But when we really get into the bones of it, what is subversive about it is it completely flips patriarchal power structures, because especially in a heterosexual dynamic, it's very edgy because it completely it invites the participants to redesign what the relationship is, how it works, and ultimately who it serves. And that is a very edgy concept, especially in a heterosexual patriarchy, because in a heterosexual patriarchy, we all know that marriage serves men. Yeah. So by flipping that, or even just daring to inquire, that automatically starts to shake the foundations. And I think that this is partly why people of all genders can feel a bit frightened by it, because it is very much not how we've been raised to see relationships that are built on tradition and obligation, not skills, relationship skills, which is a big thing that a lot of people don't have, and choice, like real consent.
Yeah, 100%. Oh, yeah, totally agree with all of that. It's big stuff. And, you touched on who the relationship has, our default relationship, which is this sort of nuclear family, straight, hetero, monogamous relationship. And yeah, it sort of made me think about all of the things that I've had to unlearn in my adult life about sex, about relating, about, all sorts of stuff, once I realized that I was just playing within these default scripts that were handed down in a patriarchy. So, like, what are some other things that you see people unlearning when it comes to sex or relationships, especially in that age bracket that you work with? Like, because I imagine there's a lot of unlearning that needs to be done for them to accept or embrace or be even open to exploring a different way.
Well, the first part of it is noticing if there, when dissatisfaction or even curiosity starts to emerge inside you about about something that's going on in your life that makes you think, is this all there is? Is this what I want for the next 20 years? So the unlearning in the initial stages of that, you have permission to question these things, that for some people that part alone is revolutionary, because it's never occurred to them that they have permission to question, why am I here and what am I doing and to what end? Like, how did I get here? And then beyond that, when, answering those questions is actually a lot. That can be years and years of self-inquiry just to answer these types of questions about what am I looking for? And then at a practical level, it's also about developing the skills to sustain relationships that are based in things and qualities that we value. A lot of people, I think, believe that relationships, especially romantic relationships, just emerge like mushrooms out of the compost, that they just kind of, they're just there. And the reality is that relationships, they are living things and they can emerge from wherever, but they do need nourishment and sustenance in order to continue. And a lot of this traditionally has fallen to women and to femmes, to people who have been heavily socialized to be social lubricators, to bring people together and to be attuned to people's feelings. And because a lot of folks don't have these skills, these relational skills that hold relationships together, when traditional, monogamous relationships start to splinter or crack or open or in some way shift, and the person who's historically been responsible for all of that attunement and glue starts to shift their attention elsewhere, what can happen is that main relationship can start to crumble, because the other person, particularly in a heterodynamic, often the man, he's never developed those skills. It's not that he doesn't have the capacity. He has the capacity. Well, potentially he does. But if he's never learned the skills of attunement, the skills of emotional self-inquiry, understanding himself, being able to tune into himself and to tune into his partners. Does he have relationships outside of the marriage, places he can go to unpack and explore his emotional world? Or is he dependent on his wife? Or is he dependent only on women to do that for him, because to talk to other men at that level is something that's completely foreign to him? So this is where patriarchal marriages can really start to crumble under the weight of polyamory and non-monogamies, because if the labor of all that stuff has been placed on the woman in the relationship, and then that woman is now splitting her energy between one or two or however many other partners or even friends, the primary unit, again, because historically these types of marriages were rooted in service. If that service is now being shared around, and that other person who's accustomed to the service doesn't have any of those skills to sustain himself in that context, that is a real learning curve for a lot of men. I think a lot of men initially who might be into the idea of polyamory are like, we can have threesomes and we can get laid and we can go to swinger parties and all that stuff. And, sure, yes, you can do all of that. But that, as far as I'm concerned, that's not polyamory. That's, having a good time. Great. No shade, no shame there. But the relationship skills you need to actually sustain multiple romantic, erotic relationships of varying levels of intensity require a hell of a lot more than just taking your pants off. And if all you do is take your pants off and then you leave the rest of the social glue to the women and the femmes in your circle, your relationships are going to fall apart because you don't have the skills to hold it together. And this is where I think a lot of hetero polyamorous relationships can really hit snags. And this is requires this learning that you're talking about. What do folks need to unlearn? They need to unlearn that relationships exist by themselves. They don't. They exist because at least one, if not all, people involved are nurturing them and nourishing them. And if you don't have relationship skills, your relationships are going to fall apart. This is why there's this whole loneliness epidemic thing going on that people are talking about, and all the men are lonely and all this stuff. It's partly whatever it is going on is big. I think in part because a lot of women are withdrawing their attention and affection from having men as their sole focus, so they're decentering men on one level, but on the other level is men haven't developed the skills to sustain these relationships themselves. And so this is where I think the work is going to be for a lot of men, especially around, invigorating their inner lives, is by picking up the slack and learning how to do some of this themselves. Because when they can have more intimacy just with themselves, they're going to feel less lonely immediately. Straight out of the box, they're going to feel better about themselves. It's going to be easier to make friends. It's going to be easier to attract and retain partners of whatever gender. But if you don't have the skills to sustain a relationship, you can be hot and have a huge dick and do all the things, but you're not going to have that rich satisfaction that you're looking for. And again, when folks are in their 30s and 40s, the quantity and volume of lovers that you might have wanted in your 20s, not to say that it's bad, it's not bad at all, but it might get a bit boring, just having loads and loads of hookups and that kind of thing. You might want to actually start having relationships that have a bit of gravitas to them. And this is where these relationship skills are necessary. And interestingly, the skills you need for polyamory are the exact same skills that you need for monogamy. It's just that it's amplified in polyamory, because in polyamory you're dealing with multiple people's feelings, not just mine and yours. And also big feelings can be really exacerbated and amplified because, a lot more feelings can come to the surface because there's just more intensity around emotion. So all of this means that the learning and unlearning of traditional models of relationships is really the biggest learning curve, I think, for people who are moving into relationship structures that sit outside what we've been spoon-fed.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, the sort of gendered socialization and conditioning that we receive needs to be dismantled so much just in order to not fall into those kind of dynamics where, it is the woman or femme that's kind of carrying the mental and emotional load and maintaining the sort of community around that couple. I think men particularly tend to be less likely to foster friendships and rely too heavily on the wife or the female partner. And it's just,
and then that in itself, coming back to the libido thing, that's a really big libido killer for women when they feel like they've got, a 40-year-old teenager that they have to tend to. It's like that. I don't want to fuck you if you're going to be like this. I want you to show up as an equal, and then I can allow myself to get turned on by you rather than having to, spoon feed you and change your nappy, and then consider, you having a 6-pack and a big dick was great, in the beginning, but it's not going to sustain me long term.
Yeah, and it's not healthy to be everything for someone. Like if they haven't got their own friends and communities and got their own shit going on, that's not hot either. And I want to talk about decentering romance, why this feels threatening for people, what that means. And just a little side quest quickly on the kind of friendship thing. A lot of people are prone to, I think we really overinvest in romantic relationships to the point where I've noticed a lot of people neglecting their friendships and community in favor of this primary partner. And, if firstly, a relationship needs a community of friends and other relationships around it to sort of thrive and to scaffold it and support it. So that's not great for the relationship to not nurture your friendships. And it's also fucked if there's a breakup and then you haven't been, keeping all of your friendships warm. And I know, I get that people go into a love bubble and I get that it's hard to prioritize multiple different relationships and we're all busy and time poor and this and that. There's all the excuses. Everyone's so low capacity nowadays. But fuck, it shits me up the wall when friends just disappear off the face of the planet just because they get a boo.
Yeah.
And I'm like, what? Like, I've never done that. I really value and prioritize my friendships, and I do not neglect them when I'm in a relationship. Obviously, there's a slight shift in the time that I'm spending and stuff so I can make room for a new person, and it's all exciting in the beginning. But like, I want to integrate my friendships and my partner. Like, I don't understand.
And that, to me, I mean, that tells me that you have a shit ton of relational intelligence already. Like, you just have that. And because of that, you understand that you prioritize maintaining your friendships because you are inherently, and I don't even know you, but I can tell by what you're saying, you're inherently a relational person. Community and people are obviously extremely important to you, so much so that you will go out of your way to live in alignment with your values. You are a relational person. People who are not oriented that way struggle with this. Okay. But if you are not relational, you have to learn the skills to be a little bit more that way. You don't have to be as full tilt as somebody like you, for example, but human beings, we need each other. We don't exist very well on our own. We can be introverts and live by ourselves and all that kind of stuff. That's all fine. But ultimately, we still need relationship skills. We still need the ability to check in with others and have others check in on us, and not always wait to be served, but actually to create connection and to take a genuine interest in the lives of the people that we care about. And if somebody is not oriented that way, it does feel harder to do that. But these are skills that anybody can learn. And when we find ourselves getting divorced or breaking up with somebody and we're like, oh shit, I used to be such good friends with so-and-so and I haven't spoken to them for 2 years. And then you text them and they're happy to see you. And then all of a sudden, 3 months later, you've got some new date and then you ditch that person again. It's like, no, this is a choice. This is about your values. And if you just see people as disposable because it's inconvenient for you and you get all, cunt drunk or cock drunk or whatever you're drunk on, and you ditch your mates, no, not okay.
Not cool.
No, I completely agree with you.
Yeah. So what is decentering romance? Like, talk me through what that can look like and why that could be a healthy approach.
Well, I think, you sort of described it. It's by recognizing that relationships are valuable. Whether you're fucking somebody or not is really neither here nor there. If you think it's important that you're fucking them, then that's great. But no, not everybody thinks it's that important. And I say that as a sex therapist, right? But, it's also, we tend in Western culture, we lump romance and sex together. The implication is that if you're dating somebody or you're romantically involved with somebody, that you're also having sex with them. That's not entirely true, as we know, but that is the implication, and that we have to, along the way, we've decided that the romantic relationship is the top of the pyramid and all other relationships sit below that, unless, perhaps family relationships kind of sit in the top of that pyramid too. But again, even as nuclear families are starting to break down and people are having blended families and kids are growing up with multiple adults, maybe parents and a step parent and then a housemate, because everybody needs extra people in the house to pay the rent, because who can afford to live in a big house, on one income these days. So all of this economic stuff is also bolstering, I think, this social shift, because people are recognizing that this whole thing of, me and you and our kids in a house by ourselves and we can do it on our own, it's not sustainable. It's too fucking expensive. Very few people can genuinely afford to live like that and still have enough money to eat nice food and have a holiday once a year. This is becoming impossible. So we have to sort of, part of this spreading around of resources, this is also a political thing, right? Because in order for life to be sustainable and meaningful, we need to have enough resources so we can at least enjoy ourselves when we're not working 50 hours a week. And so sharing things, sharing life with friends, close friends, partners, plural, family, siblings, whatever, cousins, whoever, This is how our ancestors lived up until really not very long ago. This is not, I mean, it sounds like some revolutionary, wild, witchcraft thing that you and I are talking about. I'm saying even, probably even 100 years ago, people still knew who their neighbors were, and people lived in clusters. People were not living by themselves in apartments 100 years ago. And listen, I live by myself, so I'm not saying that we are, we all need to live in group houses together. I don't think that that's going to be the answer either. But being able to really draw on community and draw on connections with people and prioritize relationships with people who we may or may not be romantically involved with, because it's good for us, because it's good for them, because it's good for the community. And also it is a way of decentering, the financial burden of looking to find one person who you're mentally compatible with, socially compatible with, sexually compatible with, romantically compatible with, financially compatible with, and then you buy a house or whatever with that person and only that person. And that's a lot. And for some people who can do that, okay, good on you, that's fine. But there are a lot of people for whom that's not going to work. To find one person who they can match with on all that criteria on a timeline that is the same as, like, well, if we're going to have kids and we've got to do it now, and and we're going to live in the same street and we have the same, like, oh my God, that is so much pressure. And then people wonder, if they can't sustain that, what's wrong with them? And rather than looking at the model that they were handed and go, hang on, maybe this model's a bit fucked. And so, not to say that the model is fucked for the people who are doing it and doing it well, good on you. But for those for whom it feels like it's just, you, no matter how hard you try, you feel like you're chasing your tail or you're going around in circles, or you just don't want to do it because it's not fulfilling for any reason whatsoever. It just feels like this doesn't really suit me. You are not broken. You are not defective because you want to change the script. If anything, it means that you are in touch with your inner world and there is something inside you that is calling your attention, and the fact that you are brave enough to pay attention to that little spark and go, what's happening? What is this thing inside me that's telling me I need to perhaps go in a different direction or ask myself a bunch of questions? Dare I imagine a different life for myself? These people, I think, are the bravest pioneers on the planet at the moment. Because it's hard. It's really hard to question the sacred cows. But if you don't, and you feel a burning inside to do it, and you ignore it, your life becomes very, very painful.
Hey, baby babes. Sorry to interrupt. I just had to pop my head into the lounge here and mention another virtual lounge that I'd love you to get around. It's the Labia Lounge Facebook group that I've created for listeners of the potty to mingle in. There you'll find extra bits and bobs like freebies, behind the scenes, or discounts for offerings from guests who have been interviewed on the podcast. There'll also be, hopefully, inspiring, thought-provoking conversations and support from a community of labial legends like yourself. My vision for this is that it becomes a really supportive, educational, and hilarious resource for you to have more access to me and a safe space to ask questions you can't ask anywhere else. So head over to the links in the show notes or look up the Labia Lounge group in Facebook and I'll see you in there. And now, back to the episode. And I love that, you talked about the sort of model or the cookie cutter, trajectory that we've had modeled to us around finding the partner that you're compatible with and that you want to spend the rest of your life with. And then in the right timing, having enough money to then buy a house and then have children and sort of do the thing that's there's nothing wrong with that, but it almost just feels like that is so inaccessible to so many people now that it's a bit outdated. It's like, that's actually not the reality. And, my generation, I'm turning 35 next week, and I'm very much in that sort of bracket where I'm probably the first batch that's really coming up against the fact that, like, I actually probably can't do the things that I was told my whole life were going to be what my trajectory comprised. I probably won't find a partner in time to have kids, or be able to buy a house, or be able to live where I want to live, and near other friends of mine also having children at the same time so that we can have community and bring our kids up together. Like, that shit happened in my parents' generation. That is not what's happening nowadays. And yeah, we are kind of feeling like something's wrong with us or that we failed, but actually just circumstances changed so rapidly. Like, I love that you mentioned the economic crunch that's happened, and really cool that there's this silver lining that we're actually being forced into clusters and actually living a little bit more in alignment with, you know, how we've been designed to, you know, in community. But also pretty negative side effects of that is that, yeah, like all of a sudden we cannot fulfill this blueprint that we all thought was waiting for us when we got to this stage of our lives. And now it's like, oh shit, not only do, like, you have to recalibrate and like let go of that and grieve that and pivot and think, hey, well, what do I do now? And how does my life look now? And then I got to come up with like a contingency plan. So yeah, it's fucking real. And something that I love about some of my friendships and the way that I approach relating is, you know, just on the decentering romance thing, I almost like center it in a different way. And I guess I'm interpreting romance maybe incorrectly here, but I love being romantic with my friends and doing romantic things for them, and like, you know, just whining and dining them, or having a bath, like just totally platonic friendships, but, you know, having a bath and just going the extra mile by putting petals in there and candles and cutting up some orange slices and just doing like thoughtful things, or sending a package in the mail and, you know, letters. I don't know. It's just, maybe that's not romance per se, it's just being a fucking thoughtful person, but like I love doing that for platonic friendships as well as people that I'm involved with romantically. And so yeah, I just feel like that would be dope if more people did that, you know, nurtured their friendships. And maybe that's like a little bit relationship anarchy, and that's kind of my next line of questioning is like, what are some
well, that is what relationship anarchy is, which again, you know, when you hear it broken down the way you just did it, it doesn't sound so edgy. It just sounds kind of, you know, kind. But that's the thing. I mean, and that's why relationship anarchy as a phrase, I use it because people sort of know what it means theoretically. Well, some people know what it means. But it does sound, I don't think the name,
it sounds intense,
lends itself well to what it actually is, which is this idea of, you know, decentering patriarchal relationship structures and basing relationships on how we feel towards the people that we're in relationship with, regardless of whether it's a romantic relationship or not. And again, really focusing on the skills we need to cultivate relationships based on the value that they hold in our lives, rather than, you know, some name of, well, you know, husband or wife or boyfriend or partner, or that is really arbitrary, that we're expected to say, well, this, you know, this person is of higher value than this person because, you know, we eat dinner
I'm fucking
together,
them, so they take priority.
or I'm fucking them, right?
Yeah. So like, when romance is no longer the primary organizing force of a life, like what else becomes possible? I know you talk about solo polyamory, chosen family, you know, community-based intimacy, platonic partnerships. Do you want to talk us through some of the options of things that you've explored or your clients explore?
Well, I think we get to, you know, I mean, the decentering romance is still a work in progress for a lot of people, because I think the grip of the romance narrative has gotten us Westerners very, very strongly. And it's very rooted in, you know, it's rooted in Hollywood movies, it's rooted in pop music, like everything. People are still singing and making movies about the one. And until that starts to peter out, we're probably still, because the culture makers are still making stories about romance. So the more I think we share stories on social media and other alternative forms of media about how important friendships are, and I think that is happening. There is more and more of that is starting to happen. What becomes possible is ultimately a form of liberation, that we get to really spread our wings and experience a version of ourselves that is much more whole, much more in alignment with our capacity to really love, and love in all kinds of ways, whether it's loving animals, or loving community at a much larger kind of macro thing, loving dear friends at a mid-range level, and then perhaps lovers at a very intimate personal level. But when we start to really shift that story of I have to find the one or I'm not whole, it just, all that power and energy that we give out to this quest for some magical other twin flame comes back to us, that we get to use for interesting stuff, like starting community projects, or weeding your garden, or just doing stuff that's actually useful and meaningful, rather than just spending hours and hours and months and years crying into your phone while you're swiping, waiting for some fabulous person to come along and solve all your problems. It's not going to happen. It's just not going to happen. And so, and I sound like a, bitter old thing when I say that. And I'm not saying that to poo-poo romance and dating. I think, romance and dating is fine. It's just not the center of the universe. So we're not saying don't do it. We're just saying put it in perspective, because your relationships are what you make of them. If you are not somebody who invests in relationships across the board, and you feel lonely, or if your partner leaves you or dies or whatever, and you're all by yourself, you don't want that. And it part of our work, part of our role, I think, as humans, is to take care of one another, especially in this current social and political climate where everything's just fucked and is getting more fucked by the minute. Like, it's not getting better, and I don't mean to be Debbie Downer, but if we're going to be real here, for a lot of us, all we have is each other right now. Things are dire, things are grim, and they don't look like they're about to get any better. So having some mates is a really good idea. I don't think it's an optional thing. I think it's compulsory now. And mates doesn't just mean someone to have a drink with. It means giving a shit, learning the skills of listening. Are you a good listener? Do you ask about other people's lives? Do you care about other people's lives? If you don't, go and learn how to do that. Go to therapy if you can afford it. If you can't afford it, listen to podcasts, buy a handful of workbooks, and do it at home by yourself. There's no excuse. If not everyone can afford therapy, I get that part, but there's loads of free stuff on the internet to teach yourself these days. Teach yourself. Just teach yourself. Pull your finger out and do it, because if you don't, you'll get left behind, and that would be terrible. There's no need. That you can do this.
Yeah, and I've got a solid 180 episodes for you guys, and they're all free. So,
See?
Yeah, so beautiful, and something that I've fallen into in the last couple of years, just really serendipitously, is like, I guess, a sort of little chosen family, found family, platonic partnership type thing, where I live with a housemate who's a single mum. We live with her daughter who's 4. And I've been living here since she was 2. And yeah, it's an unbelievable, incredibly nourishing arrangement that just works so well for both of us, and has been massively healing, so powerful, you know, especially for both of us coming from narcissistic fathers and broken families and childhood trauma. And yeah, it's just been unbelievable to just be lifting each other up and supporting each other, and kind of, you know, she's got a partner now, but we're kind of like, well, we come as a package deal, baby. So I'm just, you know, I'm Auntie Freya now. And that has been exquisite, like so nourishing and nurturing, especially with where I was at when I moved in, where we were both at. And I just value that so deeply. Like I get so much more from that than most romantic relationships I've been in, you know? So yeah, there's lots of new
But
territory
I think
that I'm
that,
kind of,
that speaks again to, when you say I get more from that than I have from many of my romantic relationships, because of the intentionality between the two of you, even though you didn't intend to necessarily become each other's, soulmates or whatever, the magic between you that exists, you perhaps couldn't have predicted that. But through living together and then, co-raising a kid together, and, just being in each other's orbits and sharing your lives together, that creates a type of intimacy. And then you especially obviously have the skills to sustain that. And I'm presuming that your housemate has some in that regard too. Otherwise it would be a lot for you. But that's a perfect example of a genuine intimacy. And of course that's going to be more fulfilling than a Tinder date. Of course it is. Because look at the structure of the relationship. Look at all the elements that go into making it enriching. And, when we're looking on Tinder or Field or wherever for that comes with practice. That comes with, repeat exposure to people over and over, and you build that kind of intimacy. You don't get that just, by looking hot.
Yeah, and you need to both be really committed and invested in continuing to opt in and continuing to like build that together. You know, I think that that's the thing that I've come up against in the past, where I'm often the more willing person that wants to really invest and put energy into a relationship, friendship or otherwise, and maybe the other person either doesn't have the skills or the staying power or just isn't as invested. And then I find myself doing a lot of the heavy lifting and I feel like I'm not being met in the middle. So when someone meets me in the middle, it's fucking magic. But I'm just conscious of time. I want to make sure we get a chance to do this segment, Get Pregnant and Die. Do you have a sex ed story for us?
Don't have sex, because you will get pregnant and die.
Don't have sex in the missionary position. Don't have sex standing up. Just don't do it. Promise?
I think not from high school. I can tell you one though. I remember when I first, one of my second or third counselling degree that I did at La Trobe Uni. And it was not in sex therapy. It was just, bog standard counselling. And so, a lot of counsellors and therapists tend to be a bit conservative and a bit, not politically conservative, but just, a little bit, they can be shy and very sensitive kind of people, which is a good quality. But sometimes they find it hard to talk about sex. And because I was very, blah, blah, blah about sex, and I have been forever, there was somebody in my counselling class who was very challenged by me talking about sex in a therapeutic context. And we were having lunch. It was me and this person and a bunch of other friends from school. And I was talking about, I don't know what, just some porn maybe or something that was on top of my mind. And I wasn't even talking explicitly to her. And this is a therapist in training. And she jumped up and she put her hand over my mouth. Like she did this to me. And she wagged her finger at me and she said, "You shut up. You go too far." And I was just like, oh my God, this is a future therapist. And so, not directly related to sex ed, but certainly to therapy ed, that if you're looking for a sex therapist, or you're trying to, or you've got a relationship with your therapist, and you're like, I wonder if this person can talk about sex. Just because somebody is trained as a therapist does not mean that they are trained to talk about sexuality and talk about sex. And a lot of therapists can be very conservative. They can be well-meaning. They can have good intentions. But if they haven't unpacked their own shit around sex, they can leak out some of their judgments and stuff onto you. And I still get a lot of clients who come to me and say, I've got my regular therapist and they're great, but I can't talk to them about sex. This is still now in 2025.
Yeah,
and
same.
so they seek me out specifically because they want to be able to talk about sex, and they feel that with their traditional therapist or their regular therapist, they can't. And it's partly because of this thing that in therapy training, you don't get sex ed in therapy school, even now in 2025. If you do, it might be an elective, like a standalone thing, but most therapists won't get trained in it. So that's my sex ed story.
That's
from
great
therapy
because, yeah,
school.
that is so true. And I often get people coming and working with me and saying, yeah, it's just not an area that I can bring up with my therapist, or that they are able to, speak about or hold space for. So, yeah, very, very true. And good to note, because a lot of people might just assume that therapists are a jack of all trades when it comes to anything that's affecting, your life and your
No, they're
mental
not.
health.
Well, I mean, with some stuff they are. I mean, I guess, basic listening skills, generally they're trained in that. But beyond, like the sex stuff especially, it's still really stigmatized, and people still really struggle to
Yeah.
talk about it. And so even at university level, people kind of flip out about sex
Yeah.
education because we still live in a society that's just really challenged by this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. So, how does this sort of state and ability to regulate somebody's nervous system like shape the sort of relationship structures that they can actually sustainably be in and maintain? Like, does that play a big role? Obviously, attachment styles and different, life experiences and trauma would come into people's different triggers or insecurities. And it's a lot to navigate when we're going against all of our scripts. Like, do you find that plays a big role, like people's nervous system state and whether they can successfully navigate this sort of stuff?
Yeah, I mean, yes, it requires the capacity to hold big emotions is matched by the capacity to hold oneself viscerally. Like there's no separation. Emotions and nervous system work, it's all the same stuff. It's just you're coming in through a different, through the side door. You're not just coming in from the head down. You're coming in kind of, this way or that way, or you're addressing the same issues, but rather than it being a mental process, it's a physical process. Because emotions are visceral. Like when you're sad, you feel it in your body. When you're happy, you feel it in your body. When you're, when you're angry, you feel that in your body. When you're, feeling resentful, you feel that in your body. We feel every emotion has a corresponding physical sensation that goes with it. But if we've been tricked into, or tuning out of those sensations, which a lot of us were raised to not pay attention to that, coming back into relational work means that you have to start paying attention to those sensations again. And they're still there. Even for folks who say, oh, I don't feel anything, I'm numb. Numb is still a feeling. So there's still information in that numbness. And so, nervous system regulation is, it is a thing. Definitely it's a thing. But it's also like the goal is not to be regulated at all times. That is not what relational somatic work is. Relational somatic work is being able to tune into what is happening with you and the other person in any given moment and notice and pay attention to what is happening, including, if you're feeling anxious or angry or jealous or overlooked, or any a bazillion feelings that you might feel that could make you lash out and say something you regret, or want to throw something, or in some way behave in a manner that's not consistent with the kind of person you want to be. The practice of regulation is not to say don't be angry or don't be pissed off or be nice. It's about being able to show up for yourself and take care of yourself as if you were a parent or a carer of yourself that perhaps you never had when you were younger, that you can advocate for yourself. You can say to somebody, it's not okay that you're doing this thing because it's really pissing me off, or whatever it is. I mean, this has to be very context dependent. There's not like a brush that I can say, all nervous system regulation work looks like this. That's not true. So it's very context dependent, but the nervous system work is about one's ability to be with oneself, especially when the feelings are unpleasant. Interestingly, I see on social media a lot, on TikTok and Instagram, a lot of, body workers and somatic types who use very sort of blissful imagery to promote and advertise their work, which I personally think is such a fucking crock. Because if you're doing somatic work well, it is messy, it's filthy, it's painful, it's ugly. You're ugly crying for a lot of it, because all that stuff, all that gunk that you've been pushing down for however many years is coming up, and you are learning how to have a different relationship with it. Being, doing yoga on a beach and fasting, fuck that. That is not somatic work. That is horse shit. It's fine. Do it as a vacation thing if you want, but don't for a second pretend that that is somatic therapy. It is not. Somatic work is really hard if you're doing it well, because you don't get to bypass all the stuff that you might get to do in talk therapy, where you're just constantly going around and around in circles about, my father did this, my mother wasn't there, my brother was an asshole, blah, blah, blah. And it's just all words, and you just go around and around and around, and all of a sudden you've been in therapy for 5 years and nothing has changed. Somatic work gets into the guts of it, but the reason it gets into the guts of it is because you connect to those visceral feelings that you had when you were 2 years old or 4 years old or 8 years old or whatever it was, and they come close to the surface so you can feel them again. And it's not, sometimes it's also about activating old memories, and for some people that happens. But again, the story, the memory part is not the goal. The goal is to connect with the feeling that you may have felt for the very first time when you were 2 or 4 or 6. But it's this feeling that emerges in you again as a 36-year-old when somebody says something to you and you just see red, and you're like, why, what happened to me? And it's got something to do with when you were 2, but you were 2. You didn't have the adult brain of a 36-year-old, but your body responds as if you're still 2 years old. Does that make sense?
Yeah, totally.
So this is why somatic work is fucking hard and so powerful, because you're connecting to those old fibers again, and that's also what makes the work so beautiful. So the marketing of somatic therapy is so unlike how it actually looks when it's done in ways that want to create change. If you just want to fast and do yoga and go to Thailand, awesome, but that's not somatic work.
Yeah, and I love what you said about how, the aim isn't to be always constantly regulated, like our nervous
No, because the
system
world
needs
is
to have.
fucked. Like, if you're just walking around being blissful while the world is burning, you're like, you're a nut. It's psychopathic.
And imagine
No,
how
you need to be
little.
able to connect with your environment and feel shit. And then you also need to be able to go, right, I'm not going to take that on today because I need a break. But being able to feel stuff, that's what somatic is. It's not about being in a constant state of bliss.
No, fuck no. No, and what I was saying is, like, it's important to be able to imagine how little bandwidth, if you were just always, always, always regulated, not feeling anything too far on either side of the pendulum, like you'd have no fucking bandwidth, no capacity, couldn't hold space for yourself, let alone anyone else. So, I think of it as like not the goal not being trying to always be regulated, but knowing how to have capacity for the massive feelings and expressions. And when you are dysregulated, how you hold yourself in that, how you, self-soothe or co-regulate, or, and how you respond to somebody else when they're dysregulated. Like it's a thing to navigate, not something to try to squash or, override. And yeah, I was going to ask about, because something that I guess a lot of people derive safety and regulation and security from, which helps them feel less out of control or whatever, is like commitment. Having something that, whether it's even real or not, some people just need the bit of paper, and if they're married, that feels like security to them, even though more than half of marriages end in divorce. But anyway, but I'm thinking like, what does commitment look like when it's no longer anchored in exclusivity or in monogamy and like you're mine and I'm yours, and that is commitment, so we're committed, so now this is safe and secure. Like that's like, what does commitment look like for people that are not relying on that construct to feel secure?
Yeah.
Excuse this quick interruption. I'm shamelessly seeking reviews and 5-star ratings for the potty because, as I'm sure you've noticed by now, it's pretty fab, and the more people who get to hear it, the more people I can help with it. Reviews and ratings actually do make a big difference to this little independent podcaster. And it's really easy to just quickly show your support by taking that simple act of either leaving 5 stars for the show on Spotify, or even better, writing a written review and leaving 5 stars over on Apple Podcasts. Or if you're a real overachiever, you can do them both. That would be mad. If you're writing a review, though, just be sure to use G-rated words, because despite the fact that this is a podcast about sexuality, words like sex can be censored and your review won't make it through the gates. Lame. Anyway, I would personally recommend doing that right now while you remember, just to get on top of it and let me know you're with me on this journey. Thanks, gang. Enjoy the rest of the epi.
It looks like feeling safe and trusting yourself first and foremost. Do you trust yourself to hold yourself and take care of yourself? If you can do that, you have the most secure attachment you'll ever need. Because then any people that you share that part of yourself with will have access to this, tree trunk-like part of you, that they can then bring out that part of themselves also. And if you married somebody without ever knowing whether or not they had that tree trunk quality inside them, but you substituted that, important relational question for a piece of paper, and then that piece of paper was taken away, and then lo and behold, you find out that the person you married is actually really flimsy and doesn't have a whole lot of integrity for themselves or for anybody else. That piece of paper was always an illusion. But if you are relationally astute with yourself and you surround yourself with people who are, more or less solid kind of characters, the chances of you finding yourself completely adrift, I mean, it still happens. Some, people can be assholes sometimes and do shit out of left field that you genuinely didn't see coming. But you're less likely to get swindled by somebody if your bullshit radar is rock solid. And a lot of people don't have that deep relationship with themselves, and they look for it in, some other kind of person, this person who's going to take care of me. And yes, we take care of each other, but the absence is overlooking somebody's flakiness, or overlooking somebody's, lack of solidity, And then you think a piece of paper is going to give you that. I mean, legally, it's going to give you that. If you're looking, I guess, for money, then it probably does matter. But if you're looking for relational integrity, you can't buy that. You demonstrate that. And so if you're hanging out with people who don't demonstrate relational integrity, then you want to have a look at what's going on. Why are you hanging out with people that don't have relational integrity? What is it about you? Do you have relational integrity? Maybe you need to lift your end of the couch up a little bit. If everyone else is doing the heavy lifting and you're the common denominator, maybe it is you, you know. So commitment looks like, do you and the people you hang out with have relational integrity? Do they demonstrate it? Not do they just talk about it, you know, the thing that they saw online. Do they demonstrate it? Do you feel that when you spend time with them? Are they someone who keeps their word? If they say, we're going to do this thing, do they show up for you? If you're sad or you need, you know, whatever, do they show up for you? That is relational integrity. But if you're always the one chasing other people and people are not there for you, there's something going on that you want to have a look at. Why are things so lopsided in your life? If you're surrounded by people who are not, you know, meeting you with the kind of energy that you are meeting them, or perhaps you're surrounded by people who are doing all your dirty work for you because you're being a bit flaky. I mean, it can go either way, you know. But relational integrity is the key. And you can have that, whatever your gender, whatever your marital situation, that's got nothing to do with anything. It is something that you demonstrate over and over and over and over and over again. And you build it over months and years of spending time with people.
And to give some examples of what that could look like in a non-monogamous setting, where you're not just defaulting to relying on that exclusivity to give you that anchoring or that security. Like, what does it look like to have relational integrity? Like to show up again and again, you know, in practical ways? Is that
I mean, it looks like initiating friend dates with people. It looks like remembering birthdays. It looks like when people tell you how they are, you remember it and you follow up a couple of weeks later and say, oh, how's that thing with your mum? How's your mum's knee? Last time we talked, you said she was, you know, whatever. You know, oh, I saw something in the news today. I know that you're really upset about these things. I'm wondering how you're feeling about what happened in, you know, wherever you live. You know, it's genuinely showing an interest in the lives of other people. And it might be like remembering stuff. It might be, you know, through things that are meaningful to them. And I'm sort of thinking a bit more now about, you know, love language type stuff, not like Gary Chapman's love languages. One of my friends, Anne Hodder Ship, wrote a book called 18 Modern Love Languages. And Anne talks about the Gary Chapman's love languages, it's too thin. He's only nominated 5. She's got 18 that she's identified. And they go into much richer stories about, you know, things like political alignment and, you know, domestic labor and these kinds of things, where it's really about how in modern relationships, how love shows up. And it's not just 5 things. Anne's identified 18. So I'd encourage you folks, you can look it up online, modernlovelanguages.com, I think it is. It's a book and a workbook, and she also runs workshops in it. But it is very much about this relational integrity and demonstrating love in ways that are sustainable in modern relationships based on our values, based on the things that we care about. And, you know, if we're not in touch with what we think and what we care about, and we're just sort of following a script, life can feel very empty because we don't really know when we're in a meaningful relationship or not, whether it's a friendship or whatever. Historically, we were told that if we were having sex with somebody, that made it a meaningful relationship, that the sex part is what gave it meaning. But these days, you know, you can have sex with whoever you want, and it may or may not be meaningful, but your friendships who you may or may not be having sex with, if they're going to be sustainable, nourishing relationships, there has to be something going on in them that makes you feel invigorated. And it doesn't always have to be happy, but there has to be some shared sparkle that you get. Otherwise, why would you bother spending time together? Like, if it's, and it's, shared interests, yes, but, paying attention again, coming back to the somatic thing, how does your body feel in the company of this person? Are you excited? Do you look forward to spending time with them, or do you think like, oh God, I hope they only stay for an hour or two, or this sense of I want to get in, but I also want to get out. What's going on there? So it can look like all kinds of things, but ultimately it has something to do with attunement and the degree to which you're in tune and attuned to each other, and how you decide for that to show up, whether it's sending each other memes, checking in with each other every day. If you've got friends who live in other countries or on the other side of the world or whatever, and you don't physically get to see them all the time. Not everybody gets to be physically connected all the time. It's just, again, the world we live in. But, if you're not checking in on your mates with texting and calling and, whatever, sending them funny videos and stuff, if you are not demonstrating that you're thinking about them and you sort of just default to letting them do all that stuff, you probably need to lift your game a little bit in that regard. If it all falls on the labor of the other person to keep the friendships lubricated, that's something that's going to be an important part of relational integrity. Is, are you pulling your weight? And how do you do it? How do you demonstrate love? This is a question I ask my clients in sessions, and a lot of people really struggle to answer that. They don't know how they demonstrate love. They are like, oh well, they know I love them. Do they? How? Because you said it once, like 4 years ago. But how do you? Again, it's about the demonstration. How do you demonstrate it? So whether it's through gifts or remembering stuff or texting or calls or dates or buying holidays for people or whatever it is, as long as there's something that you can point to, but that it happens regularly, like not, a big shopping spree once a year. That's not consistent. It's nice, but it's not consistent. What are you doing the other 364 days of the year?
Yeah, beautiful. I love that. I love that. Yeah, just showing your care, showing that you're thinking of them, showing that you're committed to the relationship because you're invested and you're accountable and you're reliable.
You don't have to be prodded. You don't have to be reminded to do it. And I have a lot of clients who have, ADHD or various, neurodivergent doodads going on. And they're like, I don't remember to do stuff. Fine. Great. No worries. We have technology now that can prompt you to remember to do that stuff. Use the technology to remind yourself to do the thing. If you can't organically remember to do it, that's because of how your brain works. No worries. Set reminders in your phone to call so-and-so or to text somebody, or
their birthdays
a little summary of what you talked about the last time you talked, so you can, next time you see them, you can remember to check in and ask about their mum or their cousin or whatever they told you, especially if it's a big thing like that. So use technology to bolster your friendships. There's no shame if you can't remember a thing that somebody said to you. Just start getting into the habit of writing shit down and using reminders if you don't remember it organically. That's totally fine. But saying, oh, I don't remember stuff, so you're going to have to do it for me.
No, that's
you got to pull your weight.
Lazy. But I love what you said about just no shame in setting some reminders or writing things down, because I feel like if you forget these things, especially how sizzled we all are these days and how just overly saturated our brains are with information, there's no shame in not remembering it. It doesn't mean you don't care if you don't remember it, but it will come across like you don't care if you never make that effort. So if I write it down, the other person doesn't know that I've written it down.
That's right.
They just know that I care.
And that's where the demonstration part comes into it, because you can have all the thoughts and good intentions in your head, but if it doesn't translate to action, that's the somatic part, the action. Are you demonstrating it? Are you using your body to embody what you're thinking and what you feel? If you are not creating that pathway of a physical demonstration,
It's no good to the other person.
then the other person's not going to know.
Yeah.
And you can be like,
Yeah.
no, but I told you that I loved you in January of 2022. And I haven't mentioned it since,
Oh,
you know.
yeah. 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 That's no good to the other person if, you know, they can't read your mind. They don't know that you care unless you show them. So, all right. I love this. Hopefully this has inspired some people to lift their game. Hey, me again. If you'd like to support the potty and you've already given it 5 stars on whatever platform you're listening on, I want to mention that you can buy some really dope merch from the website and get yourself a Labia Lounge tote, tee, togs. Yep, you heard that right. I even have Labia Lounge bathers. Or a cute fanny pack if that'd blow your hair back. So if fashion isn't your passion, though, you can donate to my Buy Me a Coffee donation page, which is actually called Buy Me a Soy Chai Latte, because I'll be the first to admit I'm a bit of a Melbourne cafe tosser like that. And yes, that is my coffee order. You can do a once-off donation or an ongoing membership and sponsor me for as little as 3 fat ones a month. And I also offer one-on-one coaching and online courses that'll help you level up your sex life and relationship with yourself and others in a really big way. So every bit helps, because it ain't cheap to put out a sweet podcast into the world every week out of my own pocket. So I will be undyingly grateful if you support me and my biz financially in any of these ways. And if you like, I'll even give you a mental BJ with my mind from the lounge itself. Saucy. And I'll pop the links in the show notes. Thank you. Later. Okay, so breaking the fourth wall here, I actually had a bit of an issue with audio. My audio cut out, so I don't actually remember what the question was that I asked Cyndi. I think it was something to do with her life as an empowered single woman who practices relationship anarchy and feels extremely content with her relationships and lifestyle. But regardless of what I asked, she gives an incredible answer. And then that was pretty much the end of the episode. I lost the TMI story. But yeah, still heaps of juice in this one. So I just thought I'd let you know that's why it might seem a little bit disjointed. And then at the end, there isn't the usual goodbye, small talk. It's like pretty abrupt ending. But at least I managed to keep most of the audio from this episode.
So I think, I've never been married and I've never had children, and I haven't wanted to do either of those things with any gusto. There were periods in the past where I thought that maybe I kind of would, or it would just, in the same way that everybody else was raised believing that this is how things were done. When I was much younger, I thought that this would just sort of happen. I was one of these people who thought marriage and children just sprung up like mushrooms, and one day you just meet somebody and all of a sudden you're married and having children. And, as I went through my 20s and realized that I was not like a lot of other women at that time, I wasn't aspiring to getting married and having kids. I was traveling the world. I was doing all kinds of other stuff. And it wasn't a big thing for me. And then when I got into my 30s and the crunch started to really come about, if you're going to have kids, you need to do it now. And I was dating a few people who I could have done that with, who did want that with me. And, I was very much on this path that I'm on with this work now at therapy school and that kind of stuff. But also really strangely extra tuned into myself at a time when, culturally 20 whatever years ago, we still were not at that level of self-inquiry around. I mean, I wasn't even aware of the term polyamory 20 years ago, but I was living as if that was my life, but I didn't know there was a name for it. I thought I was just fussy and picky, which I am. But I since realized What the problem was is that I couldn't be monogamous, and I've never been good at it. But I'm a very loyal person, which is a really interesting thing, because I think a lot of people think that polyamorous people are just commitment phobes, and I have friendships that people who I've been very intimate, close friends with for over 30 years, who I know everything about their lives. I know exactly where they are. Right now, I know exactly what they're doing. And I'm still very intimately close with them. So loyalty is not the issue with me. Commitment is not the issue. The issue for me is being spoon-fed a model of relationship that was not rooted in meaningful connection. I have over the years cultivated and handpicked my friendships with people whose values in some way, and they're not all the same types of people, they're quite disparate, different kinds of people, these people who are my friends, but they all embody qualities that I really admire. That's something that I find very attractive in people. Do they do something? Do they live their lives in such a fashion that I can admire something about them? And I can confidently say with every single friend I have, there is something that they do in their life for them that I look at and go, wow, look at them do that fucking thing. Aren't they amazing? Whether it's their paid work or how they run their home or what kind of parent they are or whatever it is, something that I look at them and go, wow, look at what an amazing human that person is. And that's why I'm friends with them. And, perhaps they look at me the same way too. I hope so. But, and they are people who over decades have demonstrated to me that they care about me. And sometimes the relationships go in and out. We're not always in each other's pockets, but I'm always in their orbit in some fashion, and they are always in mine, whether I'm living here or in Australia or I lived in Europe years ago, wherever. So, these are the kinds of things about how I live my life. I don't describe myself as single. When on legal documents, I have to use that word because that's the word that the government expects me to use because I'm corralled and forced into it, meaning I'm not married, and I'm not married. So therefore, in the eyes of the government, I'm single. But the reality is that I'm not single. I have a lot of really rich friendships, lovers, whatever, who, the government don't know about, the government don't ask me about. But being single doesn't have it's not a word that has any meaning in my life other than a word that the government wants me to use so they can categorize me in such a way that I guess is meaningful to them. But it is not meaningful to me because it's not a word that has doesn't tell you anything about my life. And so I always kind of, when I have to fill in those forms about married, single, divorced, whatever, because I'm like, what difference does it freaking make other than for data collection, I guess? So, the stigma of single, I think, still really impacts a lot of women. And I think it's changing, but there is still this thing that, for women, whether they're queer or straight, to be unpartnered implies, to be unpartnered in a monogamous partnership implies that you're somehow defective. And the reality is that a lot of women who are in monogamous partnerships are mind-numbingly lonely because they're partnered with people who don't show up for them, who don't demonstrate love to them, who don't have the relational skills that they need, but they have their piece of paper. And that's a hell of a way to live, I think. So,
All right, that's where the audio gets up to. Obviously, I do the usual goodbye and thank you to Cyndi, and all of her work is in the show notes. Highly recommend following her stuff and hopefully, using this as a bit of a springboard to reflect on your own relationships and lifestyle choices when it comes to connection and friendships and how you structure all of that within your life, your sort of social hierarchies. And yeah, maybe have to face some hard truths that maybe you're one of those people that doesn't really nourish or maintain your friendships particularly well, or that you are one of those people and sometimes you're not getting back as much as you would like, and that it could be time to shed some friendships, or maybe stop putting in 80% if you're only getting 20 back, and that's been a consistent pattern, and maybe it's that some hard conversations need to happen, and some self-reflection, but I really hope this feels empowering and inspiring to you. If you do feel like you're one of those people that aren't being the best friend, or you're really low capacity and you haven't been able to, that's okay. Like, don't feel shame about that either. There's really good reasons why this is, but maybe from now on you can make more effort and you can actually see your friendships and relationships through a new lens. Cool. I'm going to leave it there for now. Thank you if you've stuck it out this long. I know it's a long episode, but really appreciate you tuning in. And that's it, darling hearts. Thanks for stopping by the Labia Lounge. Your bum groove in the couch will be right where you left it, just waiting for you to sink back in for some more double L action next time. If you'd be a dear and subscribe, share this episode, or leave a review on iTunes, then you can pat yourself on the snatch, because that's a downright act of sex-positive feminist activism, and you'd be supporting my vision to educate, empower, demystify, and destigmatize with this here podcast. I'm also always open to feedback, topic ideas that you'd love to hear covered, questions or guest suggestions, so feel free to get in touch via my website or over on Insta. You can also send me in TMI stories to be shared anonymously on the pod. My handle is FreyaGraf_the Labia Lounge, if my account hasn't been deleted for being too sex positive, which, is always a possibility with censorship. But just in case the chronic censorship finally does obliterate my social channels, I'd highly recommend going and joining my mailing list and snagging yourself some fun freebies for the trouble at www.freyagraf.com/freebies. Anyway, later, labial